Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gael Beltran and I'm here to teach you how to use Django in a practical way so you can start applying your knowledge to your own projects. If that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Token authentication is one of those things that seems overcomplicated and daunting to implement at first, but in this video, you'll learn how simple and logical it actually is once you get the hang of it. I'll teach you how token authentication works and how to implement it in Django. We'll make use of Django REST framework for creating tokens and Postman for making requests to our server. Token authentication is a way of validating a user by associating it with a token. A client makes a POST request providing a user's credentials to an API endpoint. Then, the server validates those credentials and gives a token in return. The client can add the token to the authorization header of each subsequent request. The server will receive the requests with the authorization header included and provide access to protected API endpoints. We'll start by creating a folder for our project. Let's create a virtual environment and activate it. This way, we can install Python dependencies in an isolated environment. We can activate it with the source command. Now, we will install Django inside our environment. With Django installed, we can create a project. Let's check that everything's working with the run server command. We'll begin by creating a new application in our project. Now, let's open Visual Studio Code. First, we need to add our newly created app to the list of installed apps. Let's check that everything's working. Now, let's install Django REST framework. And add it to our list of installed apps. We'll need to install Django course headers to allow Django to receive requests from different origins, in our case, Postman. We'll add it to our list of installed apps and to our list of middleware, just above common middleware. Let's run the initial migrations and validate that everything's working. Now, let's start working on our application. Let's add the user's application URLs to our project. Now, we'll create the URLs file. We'll create a single route. Let's begin by importing everything we'll need. Now we'll create a simple view which only purpose is to return a list of usernames. Let's validate that our view is working. And everything's working as expected. Now we will create the same request inside Postman. We get an empty list because we haven't created a single user. Let's create the first one. And we are now getting a list with one item. Let's add the token authentication class to our view. This way, we told Django that we want to authenticate this view using a token. And we'll add the isAuthenticated permission so only authenticated users can access this view. As you can see, we are getting a message telling us that we aren't authenticated. The first step for adding token authentication to our project is adding restframework.addToken to our list of installed apps. The add token includes a migration that adds a token model to our database, so we need to run migrations again. First, let's create a token manually for our first user. As you can see, the add token app includes a token model. This model needs a user as a foreign key, so let's get our first user. We can now create a new token and associate it with our user by adding the user as a foreign key. Let's run our server again and test our newly created token. The first step of the token authentication flow is adding an API endpoint where a client can post its credentials and get a token in return. Django REST framework already includes a view that provides this logic. Let's make a request to our newly created endpoint and try to get a token in return. It needs to be a POST request. As you can see, it's asking us for users' credentials. We'll need to provide a user's username and password. Since we provided the correct credentials for our first user, we are getting its associated token in return. Let's copy the token and add it to our previous protected request to try to get the list of users. As expected, by including a valid token in our authentication header, Django can validate our user and we can access protected views. Of course, in a real application, we won't be manually creating tokens for each user. The idea is that each time a user gets created, a token gets automatically created for that user. We can make use of a neat feature of Django called signals. A signal is a way of executing a piece of code each time something specific happens in our code. We make this by subscribing to an event and executing a method in response. Let's open our models.py file and begin by importing our settings, the post save signal, and the token model. We'll declare that we want to listen to the post save event of the add user model defined in our settings file. By default, this is the user model. We'll create a method that will get executed each time a user gets created. We'll use a simple condition. If the user is created, we'll create a token model and add the newly created user as a foreign key. Don't forget to import the receiver decorator. Now, let's create a new user and check if a token gets created automatically for that user. We'll make a post request with our user's credentials to the getAuth token endpoint. As you can see, we are getting a token in return. Token authentication seems daunting at first, but after understanding the basic flow of posting credentials to get a token in return and using that token to access protected routes, you can see that it's actually quite simple. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.